A pleasure to meet all at last. And so, today, it's Sunday. And just as you're well aware, I had covered the Stuart Little trilogy as of last week. All three movies, but of course, I capped it all off with the proposition that I would see Joker Folie, Deux, which is basically the sequel to the big-time, record-breaking movie known as Joker, starring Joaquin Phoenix. And in this instance, 5 years had passed since the start of the Joker series itself. The Joker made an epic breakthrough with $93 million on its opening weekend in the box office, which at the time was a huge record. And with the sequel, a lot of us did have some high expectations, given how impressively well made the first film was. It was a film that was so well made, they didn't bother with any kind of merchandising or anything like that, because it just did so well on its own. So what does the sequel, Folie, Deux, has to offer? Well, it had to offer a few different things. It not only starred Joaquin Phoenix as the titular role once again, it also took place a couple years after the events of the first film. You know, when Joker was revealed to be the one behind the murders of 3 people on the subway, and of course the same man whom shot down Murray Franklin on live TV, prompting him to become a man of crime, to become a national icon. And then, 2 years after those events had passed by, while he was being held at a correction center, he eventually would be put in trial, where this would be his second time appearing on live TV. This would certainly be the case of the century, as it's proposed. All the while, Arthur Fleck does in fact get to meet up with another person in particular. While he is centered in E Ward, he actually gets to go to B Ward after some time and after some struggling takes place. After all, Arkham itself is a pretty horrific place to be in. And this movie sure does capitalize on the likes of satire, with the guards being very cruel toward the prisoners, some prisoners rebelling, some prisoners protesting, and loads of other things out there. The satire in this film compared to the first is probably even higher in comparison. And it's very difficult to try to keep yourself composed and maybe even sane. So, this movie definitely tested a lot of things mentally. And the way I see it, it's really nothing that special. Because there are lots of movies nowadays where you can see lots of horrible language being said, lots of awful, vulgar slander, and other such dialogue that you would never think would be put into a film. But this movie sure did manage to break a lot of boundaries. However though, after this time had come around, where Arthur Fleck gets to know the members of the B Ward, and even earn the trust of some of the guards, being that he was well behaved at the time, always taking his medication, and always keeping himself in check, while keeping the jokes to a minimum, even though the guards would basically just taunt him by prompting him to make jokes and make them laugh, just as he had done before then. After all, that was basically what he was good at, since he had already gone so far to murder several people, as we saw in the first film. You'd think with the sequel, all this stuff would carry on. But this basically is more or less just an entirely changed person after 2 years of time spending at an Arkham correctional facility. Anyways though, once he does eventually get hooked up with the likes of another prisoner from B Ward, basically a music class of some sort, which does allow the prisoners in B Ward to connect with each other and also use music as a means to sort their problems out. Well, eventually the trial does kick off, and with all the crap that he had gone through in Arkham, it almost seemed like Arthur Fleck was worthy to catch a break. Being that this was as close as he can get with the outside world as possible, all the while having to be escorted by an armored man as well as some squad cars. Eventually this boils down to one of the key elements of this film that differentiates it from the first: the musical elements. After all, the subtitle itself, Folie, Deux, is in fact an expression that is commonly shared by most. It is in fact meaning delusion or mental illness shared by two people in close association. And of course, that's more true than ever with a film like this. You have two characters. One is proposed as Joker, and the other is supposedly as Harley Quinn, formerly known as Harleen Quinzel, whom, as we know, was a popular psychiatrist in Arkham itself, up until the point where she gets to meet up with Joker, and her life would basically be twisted as much as his own. Yeah, it's one of those kind of relationships where eventually the partner in particular, whom used to be normal and in check, is now out of control and lunacy. Lots of it. Full of lunacy. So by all means, the trial itself, we would have expected it to be as much of a crazy show, which it does. It basically starts off in a more normalized stance. Even the judge basically just points right at Fleck, asking him to not put on some kind of show on live TV ever again. Of which that, after all the stuff he had gone through, his interview with a man named Patty, his meetups along with his own lawyer, his meetups along with his own doctors that he had known over the years to deal with his own illnesses, and of course, District Attorney Harvey Dent. Yeah, in this instance though, we have Harvey Dent, who is not exactly played by anyone that we had formerly known back in the day, like Troy Baker, for instance, but instead it's a man named Harry Lottie. And of course, we do have many other people coming around in this movie as well. But the biggest, most important piece of all, of course, would probably have to be the guard. Yeah. One of the guards at Arkham, whom is known to really carry out a lot of the crap against many of those guys. At Arkham itself. It's really one of a kind. This guard in particular, he's pretty spiteful. But by all means, this movie itself really does give us a whole different feeling of looking at a trial and eventually seeking a certain death sentence for a man who, dressed as a clown, caused lots of uprisings, lots of damage and deaths, and so much more to the state of New York. So it certainly made quite a lot of sense that at the time, being that both these movies take place in the early 80s, it was quite a time to be alive. A terrible time to be alive. Compared to what we have now, the world around us just feels way more peaceful than we would have ever thought. There's not even a sound of gunfire. There's not even a sound of sirens. There's not even many bugs outside. Albeit because it is getting colder as the weeks progress later into the year. But let's just say that when the trial does eventually get off on its closing statements, we get to see Arthur Fleck actually go in as the Joker one last time. No joke, they do allow him to put on his makeup, just like what had happened on the night of Murray Franklin. And well, when all the testimonies come in, including a former partner of Arthur Fleck at a job that he previously had, where he worked as a clown, yeah, it made a lot of sense that by becoming a clown, it eventually would lead to him developing his own alter ego, which Fleck used to commit series upon series of mass crime, destruction, and whatnot. Anyways though, Mr. Puddles, whom was basically a small man that used to work alongside Arthur Fleck, And then, of course, there was another man whom he had actually bashed his head into. So, enough said on that part. But it is impressive that Mr. Puddles was actually able to come in and provide his own testimony just so Fleck can actually get himself one more chance to speak with him. But man, what really is emotionally heart-wrenching though is the fact that Puddles actually states his last thing to Fleck up until the end of the trial. Puddles lists out that lots of people were pretty rude to him in the past. They made fun of his size and stature, but Fleck was very different. He actually treated him properly. Fleck actually gave Puddles the respect he wanted. The interest. That is at least a rather heartwarming and relieving moment in all the crap that had gone through. The kind of stuff that Fleck had done, you never would have thought that he'd actually have some sort of heart within him that allowed him to be more warm towards others. Especially with someone like Mr. Puddles, but by all means, that at least was one unique way to turn the plot around, to make it more positive towards Fleck's own interest. However, it still does continue to go negatively for him. With the somewhat positivity being that he had a lot of fans out there, Fleck definitely felt more confident than ever, having his own shows, having his own fantasies, alongside his partner, Harley Quinn. And with all the crazy cutaways that we get relating to certain shows that take place, which were more than just illusions that happened in Fleck's mind, all these different songs that we hear, which were mostly a combination of jazz, funk, and pop, it was a unique blend of certain musicality that we never would have thought would appear in a movie like this. Oh, but I kid you not though, probably one of the most impressive parts here was actually the very beginning of the film, where it actually plays a Warner Brothers style cartoon, similar in a way to Looney Tunes. Yeah. It's basically about Arthur Fleck and his shadow as he enters the stage with his Joker identity. And his shadow basically does try to get the best of him, even going so far to handing Fleck over to the police as they bash into the studio. The shadow caused the crime, but Fleck is made the accuser in front of the cops. Yeah. Need I say more about that animated segment? So, with all that has come around, with the impressive level of mental mess-ups, and all the incredible visuals, colors, and not so bright moments, the rather dark, dreary, gritty atmosphere that gives us Joker Folie Deux eventually culminates to a certain ending. Yeah. The end of the trial comes around. The judge, the jury, and the many people that bear witness in the courtroom, they all get to witness the moment, as well as the coverage that was happening from the cameras in the room, where one jury member rises up and proclaims her verdict. They find the Joker guilty as charged with these deaths. And just as Fleck himself begins to laugh, other people start trying to take him down, angered as they are, that Fleck just laughs at the crimes he's made. But then all of a sudden, boom! An explosion goes off in the building, completely destroying the wall and killing or injuring a good amount of people in there. Even Dent is badly injured from the blast. Fleck, however, was actually able to walk away with some minor difficulty, and even with some bad tinnitus because of how loud the blast was. You know, the sound effect was pretty shocking and rather loud. Like, even worse than the jump scares from FNAF. But in any case though, Fleck is actually taken in by some fans of his. He gets into their car, but eventually decides to make a run for it. Police cars start coming after him, and some people basically look on, noticing that Fleck is now out of the courtroom and running away. So, talk about a twist. But what really is upsetting though might have to be the fact of what happens afterwards. You see, because one part, there was a point where Harley would come around and the Joker basically announced that he was no longer the Joker, but instead just Arthur Fleck, and willing to pay the price. She obviously walks out, and even as he puts in a phone call with one more song to her, well, when he gets out of the courtroom, goes up that large flight of stairs that we remember so well. He meets up with Harley towards the top, and she just says to him that they are finished. So even though he tried to do what he could, he just couldn't quite catch her interest anymore. It was one thing where the two were together for a while, even in the days of Arkham, but after his trial had gone down with his guilty verdicts being put together and that eventual explosion, apparently this killed the trial completely, basically rendering all his verdicts and the sentencing meaningless. It's likely that the jurors and the judge might have been killed in the blast, being that Dent himself was badly injured. I wouldn't be too surprised. That does remind me though, when is Dead Meat ever going to make a kill count episode of the Joker films? Knowing that we have a sequel now, it would make a lot of sense. Anyways, when Harley does storm off after one last song was saying, all Arthur could do was just stand there. Yeah. The cops basically just catch up to him and he gets taken away. But, okay. That's just the thing about it that I'm sure a lot of people are asking about. Why would he just stand there and not escape? What were all those people doing? All those protesters that were out there, all those guys that were in clown makeup and whatnot, that were just following the Joker's every move. Why didn't they do anything to stop any of this? More importantly, why did Arthur just not bother to move out and flee even further? I mean, he could have gone back to his old house. He could have had something else done. I guess just from the fact that he denounced his Joker identity right in front of the cameras just really turned off a lot of people. So, shutting down the idea right there, basically he did himself in a way. And right then and there, he gets escorted back to Arkham, since obviously they couldn't continue the trial from there. At least until further notice. But it wouldn't have mattered anyway, because, well, a guard comes by and tells Arthur that he has a visitor. So could it be Harley coming back one more time? Or could it be something else entirely? After all the crap that they had gone through together, the lies that she had taught him, and the lies that he eventually discovered, thanks to his now ex-lawyer, whom he fired? Yeah, like I said, there was just a lot of stupid crap that Joker pulled off in this film compared to the last one, which the Joker wasn't really born yet. He was just some silly clown waving a sign saying everything must go. So, yeah, it's quite honestly quite a big contrast to what we had in the last film. But what really is shocking though is the ending in this instance. Like I said, Arthur gets pulled out to go to the visitor's room, where unfortunately he would encounter another man whom actually proposes to have a joke made. Fleck agrees, and even though they both share some same things, the punchline came in the form of several stabs to the stomach. Yeah, no joke. Right there in the midsection, with a homemade shank. That man, as deranged as you could possibly guess, kills Arthur Fleck. Oh man. I've officially seen it all at this point. A not so climactic finish to a movie that has had more music than action and violence. I mean, it's a unique way to change the pace here. But really, it just feels way more different than what the first film had to offer. And what's even more disturbing is the fact that when I saw this with Nolan yesterday, He actually proposed a theory that supposedly this was a lot like the Heath Ledger Joker, which didn't appear until many years later. But the thing is that that man that stabbed Arthur actually could have been the real Joker. Whether that's true or not, I guess it's just impressive. Arthur Fleck is the Joker by media standards, but the actual Joker goes to someone else? I mean, at this point, where would I have to look? Joker Folie Deux certainly did have a lot of things going for it. It had a lot of music, which I'm more than grateful for. Because musical moments in a movie that's all about violence, crime, and whatnot, I guess it's just a good way to help lighten the mood and soften down the already gritty tones that the first movie had given us. We had a lot of music in that movie, including old-timey tunes, including Send in the Clowns, That's Life, and then of course there was a killer soundtrack. The same thing of course happens with this movie. And believe it or not, the same song, That's Life, also makes an appearance in this movie. But this time it's sung by Lady Gaga. Yeah. So in addition to dumping the Joker, she actually has her own last laugh as he just lays there looking right at the camera. A bit creepy when you think about it. And he's not even smiling or anything. I guess this really is the fact that Arthur Fleck is just Arthur and not the Joker that we've come to know about. It's one thing for us to get to know the fact that there was a Joker named Arthur Fleck, when in reality, the real name of the Joker is quite a bit of a mystery. There, of course, was the proposition of Jack White, but that was supposedly just an alias of his. And one of the oldest, I might add. And he's had tons of them over the years. And that's probably just the big thing about the Joker character himself, is that he's a rather mysterious character. Probably one of the most mysterious main antagonists in superhero history. And the fact is that despite his lanky frame and his not so bright tactics, he actually puts up impressive fights with the Batman himself. Like, he doesn't need weapons, he doesn't need armor, he doesn't need a sword or a gun or bow and arrow. He just uses his fists, and he actually is as skilled as you can possibly imagine when it comes to combat. With the Dark Knight himself, a man trained by the League of Assassins. But in this film, we never get a Batman. We never get anything for the Joker to face against. Well, other than Harvey Dent, whom we know became Two-Face, but that was until a while later. Like I said, even though this takes place a while before a majority of different Batman events transpired, canonically speaking, it really is just an impressive mystery. Arthur Fleck was revealed to be the Joker in this instance, but he's not the Joker. And instead it's another guy, a random nobody, whom he meets at the last seconds of his life, only to get murdered in cold blood by total surprise. So, yeah, that's just what it is. And thank goodness he is dead, because that way it gives us an excuse to say, no more Joker. No more Arthur Fleck. No more of this BS. You know, again, I feel like that it would have just been a good idea to leave the first one well enough alone. And with this film, we do get a good amount of stuff in this film to work with. Having Lady Gaga in as Harley Quinn was a unique idea. But let's be real, she's more of a singer type of person than an acting type of person. It was one thing where she was in A Star is Born from 2018 alongside Bradley Cooper, but that's because that was a musical film to begin with. And here, the musicality is mostly there because it's just a subliminal form of fantasy, a psychological mess-up that goes on with the likes of both Lee and Arthur. I mean, again, the main idea with all this is having Harleen and Arthur both together, in love, possibly having a kid, and getting out of prison and finding themselves a new home to live with, together, happily ever after. And all the while that Arthur is trying to struggle with his own criminal life that he had made because of what had happened, like I've said, there's just a lot of things about this film that while they definitely worked in their own way, the musical parts alone would be worthwhile. And the soundtrack is sure to be something that I'm going to include in Greatest Hits of the year of 2024. But all in all, it's just a bit strange. Quite a contrast to the first film. And I don't quite suppose that everybody's going to be willing to see this. But having all the stuff that goes on at Arkham and the courthouse and all the other places in New York, it doesn't really pain me to say this, but the scoring is unfortunately going to be a bit low. It's not often where it happens, but 5.5 out of 10.1 is my overall scoring on this film. I'm sure others will have it even lower, possibly higher. So, good for you on that part. But otherwise, you could probably save a few bucks and just watch other films. Films that are going to be coming out pretty soon. Like, there's Piece by Piece, which is another Lego movie. And it does make sense that we start getting more of those because of how successful they've become over the years. And a Lego movie starring Pharrell Williams? I mean, he's made newer music in recent times. So, of course he's going to have to come back and do some big time work with the record industry. Otherwise, maybe I will talk more about other films, but I might need a bit of a break from that. And I am going to have to start talking about other films as well, once again, for the first time in years. So I'll see you guys again with more of this stuff, and as always, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side.
Whatever I want, I usually get, and I'm thinking I want you.